Shalom Aleichem, Ach and Achot, brothers and sisters and friends. This is your servant Ephraim Haima giving you the parashat number 49, named Ki Tetze by Dr. Roy Carlos Reyes, International Ministries Restoring the House of Israel. It is a privilege having you with us this day. I will begin with a tefillah prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Blessed are you, eternal Al Elohim, sovereign of the universe, that has sanctified us with your commandments, and has ordained us in respect for the studies of your word of the Torah. Today's Aliyah from the Torah, number 1. Haftarah is Isaiah 54 verse 1 through 10, and the Brit Hadashah verses of this study is Revelation chapter 12 verse 1 through 14 verse 20, Matthew 5 verse 31 and 32, Mark chapter 10 verse 2 and 12, and Luke chapter 20 verse 27 and 38. For further reading from the Brit Hadashah, you can study Luke chapter 10, 29 through 37, Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2 through 15, Matthew chapter 5, 31 through 32, chapter 19, verse 3 through 12, chapter 22, verse 23 to 32, and Mark chapter 10, verse 2 through 12, Mark chapter 6, verse 56, Matthew chapter 9, verse 20, Luke chapter 8, verse 44, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9, Philippians chapter 3, verse 2, Revelation chapter 2, verse 15, Luke chapter 12, verse 6, and 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 9. Also, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 18. Okay, so Ki Tetze. Ki Tetze means when you go out in Hebrew. When you go out. First Aliyah chapter 21, verse 10 through 21. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 12, you shall bring her into your house, and she shall shave your head and let her nails grow. If a man wishes to marry a prisoner who has been taken in a non-compulsory war, he will have to make her shave and grow her nails so that she will not be deceived by physical appearances. If he still loves her, despite not having such a nice physical appearance, the marriage process will continue. And in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 13, he shall take off his garment from his captivity, and remain in thy house, and weep for his father and for his mother for a whole month. After that you can come to her and be her husband, and she will be your wife. According to the Midrash, the daughters of the ancient peoples adorned themselves in times of war to sexually seduce enemies. Therefore, her attractive clothes that the prisoners wore before she was captured had to be removed. The purpose of removing them is that the man no longer finds her attractive as before. Before he can marry a prisoner of war, he had to wait at least a month before she can cry for her father and mother. This teaches us, on the other hand, that Yahweh is interested in having his souls comforted before marriage. It also teaches us that Yahweh does not want the male not to make a rash decision and take marriage lightly. She had to cry so long that the man would not see her as a content and happy, but unattractive compared to the Israelite women. Another option of interpretation would be that we are talking about cutting her hair and nails. The Hebrew text literally says, "He will do the nails." In order to go through a kind of purification similar to that of lepers, Nazarenes and Levites, when shaving all their hair of their body, Leviticus chapter 14, verse 9, Numbers chapter 6, verse 9, and chapter 8, verse 7. It is a type of conversion for the captive to leave their previous identity and of, of become part of the people of Israel. So 1 month, right? The slave girl can also be compared to Israel, who was an Egyptian or who was in Egypt. Yahweh brought her out of Pharaoh's bondage. When her previous owner had died, Pharaoh, she was free to marry Yahweh. But since the Eternal doesn't break his own Torah, his own word, he had to wait at least 30 days before he could marry her again. Thus, among other reasons, there was a waiting time between the departure from Egypt and the delivery of the Ketuvah, writing the marriage contract at Sinai. Here is a commandment which as in the previous ones goes in the opposite direction to the practices of this world, who lives without the truth of the eternal creator. For the nations without Torah were captives, and after a battle they were held as slaves. However, for the Hebrews it was stipulated by the law that they should be treated in a different way. For example, the women of the defeated nations who had been captured, they had to be respected to the point that a month was established for them to live their sentence in peace. At the end of this period, it was required for them to determine the intention of her imprisonment and who would retain her as a wife or allow her to leave. This, without a doubt, is evidence of the justice with which the Eternal has proposed to clothe his people. From the above, it can be affirmed that for those who serve the Eternal Father, there is no room for injustice or cruelty. Let us always remember these words of Kepha, recorded in Kepha's 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 15 through 16, and says, "But as he who has called you is holy, so be holy in every way of your way of life. For it is written, be holy, for I am holy." So remember, 1 month was required. Another way in which this passage can be analyzed allegorically is to assume that the slave girl is a typology of Israel. Having been in Mitzrayim, the world, the Eternal freed her from the bondage of the Pharaoh. The moment her previous owner dies after being overcome by the power of Yahweh, she is free to marry the Almighty. However, as mentioned, since the Eternal does not break his Torah because of because it is the expression of his character, he waits to be able to marry her again. For Elohim, 1 day is like 1,000, and 1,000 is 1 day. That is why, among other reasons, there was a waiting time between Mitzrayim departure and the giving of the Torah, the Ketuvah or marriage contract in Sinai. Let us read Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 14, which says, "But it shall come to pass that if it does not please you, you shall let it go with her, but you shall not sell her for money, nor mistreat her, because you have humiliated her." The purpose of this deal with this woman is that she should not be pleasant to the man. It is not an ideal situation for him to marry her because it can bring negative consequences in the future. And so, Yahweh sets these rules so that he finally realizes that it is not in his best interest to marry her. The Torah does not forbid this type of marriage, rather, it discourages him with these measures. If the man wants to marry in spite of this, he can do so. However, she runs the risk that in times she will become a hated or disliked woman, according to the following verses, and eventually a rebellious child will be born from her marriage, according to the verses that will follow. And according to the Midrash, the mother of the rebel Absalom was a gentle war captive who had been captured by King David, named Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, Shemuel, Beth, 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 3, who was one of the war captives that King David had fought victoriously against King Yeshur. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 15 and 16 says, "He cannot make the son of the beloved firstborn in preference to the son of the hated one, who is the firstborn, in the day that he divides what he has among his children. He cannot make the son of the beloved firstborn in preference to the son of the hated one, who is the firstborn." This here teaches us that when Jacob gave the birthright to the sons of Joseph, who was the son of his favorite wife, he did not do so because of his love for Rachel, but for other reasons. Reuben lost his birthright because of his sin of adultery. Shimon and Levi lost the opportunity to obtain it in turn because of their violence in the city of Shechem. Jehudah received a special blessing, but the birthright passed to the sons of Joseph by prophetic revelations. We can see that in 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. We must also highlight the fact that before the giving of the Torah, there were laws that were not kept by the patriarchs. This designation is derived from the Hebrew root bakah and the strong number 1069, which means to come first. It implies being the first privileged. It refers to the responsibility conferred on the holders of the right of primogeniture. Examples: Bereshit, Genesis chapter 49, verses 3. Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 21, 17. Tephilim, Psalms 78, 51. And Psalms 105, verses 36. Shemot, Exodus chapter 13, verse 12 and 16 through 16. This commandment helps us to better understand Jacob's course when he gave the birthright to Joseph's son. He himself did not determine it just because he was the son of his favorite wife and loved for Rachel, but for other reasons of major force. Let us recall that Reuben lost his birthright because of his sin of adultery. Shimon and Levi lost the opportunity to obtain it in turn because of their violence in the city of Shechem. Judah received a special blessing in this way. The birthright to passed over to Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, by prophetic revelation found in First Chronicles chapter 5, verses 1 through 2. All this should be understood as a sign of spiritual elevation on the part of Jacob, who manifests a knowledge and subjection to a series of instructions given by the Eternal prior to the delivery of the written Torah. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 17 says, "But he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of her hated, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. To him belongs the right of firstborn, of primogeniture." When it says that the firstborn inherits a double portion of everything that the father has, it means that he will have a double portion among the siblings who receive the inheritance. According to R. Monk, at first, the firstborn were going to be the priest, and therefore they would not have any inheritance of land. That is why he obtained a double portion of the father's property, accepting him for his land. The commandment once again puts justice first and allows no excuses for non-compliances. When this passage mentions that the firstborn inherits a double portion of all that the father possesses, it means that he will have a double portion among the brothers who receive the inheritance. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 43, verses 33 through 34, and Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 15. This means that the figure representing the father would be the firstborn. He would succeed the father as head, and he would serve as the priest of the home. You find that in Exodus 13, verses 2, verses 12, Exodus chapter 22, verses 29, Exodus chapter 34, verses 19. By this title, Yahshua is called in Luke chapter 2, verse 7, and she gave birth to his firstborn son. He wrapped him in a swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Not only is he himself named after his time, but this title is used in Romans chapter 8, 29, which says, "For he foreknew them and predestined them to reproduce the image of his son, so that he might be the firstborn among many brethren." To recognize him as the firstborn of all creation. Furthermore, Rabbi Shaul, known as Paul, is Colossians chapter 1, 15 through 18, presents him as the firstborn among those who have their names written in the heavens. In turn, the writer of the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 23, and chapter 1, verse 6, identifies him as the firstborn of the dead risen, to which John joins through the vision receiving in Revelation chapter 1, verse 5. Excuse me. And from Yahshua, the Mashiach, the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth, to the one who loves us and delivered us from our sins with his blood. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 18 says, "If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father, or mother, and when they punish him, he does not yet listen to them. Here, this verse in the Hebrew word that has been translated stubborn is sarah, which means straying. The root of the Hebrew word that has been translated rebellious is mara, which means to disobey or to refuse. It is one who disobeys the words of the Father. Rebellion is considered by the Eternal as a very serious attitude and has to be harshly corrected in the life of the child before he reaches adolescence. According to the Talmud, here we are dealing with a young man over 13 years of age, because otherwise he could not be tried before the court, specifically referring to a son in the first 3 months after his bar mitzvah. After those 3 months, the laws of the wayward and rebellious son no longer apply. When we speak here of punishing him, it refers to giving a formal warning to the court to be flogged or beat with a whip or strict torture. If he then continues to steal from his father, to eat a lot of meat and drink a lot of wine, he will have to be executed. Tradition teaches that this case of the execution of a rebellious young man called a glutton and a drinker has never occurred in the history of Israel, because he did not meet all the demands required by the judges. And since it has not been fulfilled in the history of the people of Israel, will it be fulfilled when Mashiach returns, according to what he said, until it is all fulfilled, which is stated in Matthew chapter 5, verses 18? In Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 20, says, "And they shall say to the elders of the city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He does not obey us. He is a gluttonous and drunkard." This insatiable or unquenchable character is considered to be something very negative by the Torah. Self-control is the fruit of the spirit of holiness. Galatians chapter 5, verse 23. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, which says, "For Elohim has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind." Self-discipline is part of a good character and something parents have to teach their children from a young age. One of the most important tasks parents have to teach their children not to be slaves to their desires, but to master their impulses and be guided by principles. Lack of self-control is condemned by the Torah. There are especially two areas where men have to learn to control themselves, which is food and sex. If you can't tame these two areas in your life, you'll never become spiritually mature. Drunkenness is condemned by the Torah. Yahshua HaMashiach was falsely accused with ill-intentioned remarks made of his person, of being a glutton and a drunkard, as recorded by Matthew chapter 11, verse 19, which says, "But the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, Behold, there is a man who eats and drinks wine, a friend of publicans and sinners, but wisdom is justified by its deeds." Why wait a whole month? An immature person does not know how to wait. The kids don't understand the word afterwards. They want it all right now. The Torah was given to forge the character of Israelite people to be mature. One important thing about an improved character is self-control. It is the fruit of the spirit promoted by the Torah. The fact of having to wait and not enjoying pleasures immediately is good for the development of maturity. If children receive everything without having to wait, they will have problems in the future because there are many things in life that are not accessible in the short term but in the long term. The one who knows how to wait and withstand the pressure of immediate desires is a mature person and can reach very high on the scale of responsibility and spirituality. The soldier who falls in love with a prisoner of war does not have the right to enter into an intimate relationship with her without having gone through a trial period of 1 month. The Torah does not allow him to follow his immediate impulses because they may create major problems later on. The soldier's impulse has to be submitted to the rules of the Torah. He has to let her cry for a month at his house so that he can see her up close and get to know her well before marrying her. He will have to learn not to be directed by his immediate impulses and wait a whole month until he can get closer to her. It is forbidden to touch it before the wedding. He who gives free rein to his sexual desires is a beast and not a man. Strong men are those who know how to control their minds and emotions and channel them within the perimeters established by the Torah. A person who is a slave to his impulses is fickle, unfaithful, and dangerous. A person who superimposes divine principles over his emotions will be steadfast, faithful, and loving. A society whose citizens have not learned self-control from their parents become poor, corrupt, and violent. A society run by principles of the Torah becomes rich, free, and secure. Study the Torah every day and learn to master your desires. Don't buy things as soon as you see them. Don't follow behind your eyes or behind your emotions. Be constant, be faithful, and fulfill your duties before the Eternal and before men. Think carefully before making the decision to get married. Marriage is for life. This concludes the first Aliyah given for Sunday's parasha number 49, Ki Tetze, Ki Tetze, chapter 21, verses 10 through 21, verses 21. I will do tefillah. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Yahweh Elohim, King of the universe, for allowing me to give your Torah. We thank you for all who has been able to be with us today, and continuation with Aliyah number 2, part 2. Thank you. Shalom.